Good afternoon. My name is Randy Ripkey. I'm the owner of Accurate Messages telephone answering service and also the developer of Taskbuilder Cloud and Daisy Data Analytics phone app. I've been in the answering service business since 1995 and been selling billing software since 2000. And with me today are two people that probably need no introduction. Let's start with Allan.
Well, I've been in the business for 50 years as of this weekend. I took my job on July 4th weekend in 1972, and my business is called Answer, A-N-S-E-R, and I've been president of ATSI, also NAEO, and one or two other answering service associations. And I was an accountant before I got in the answering service business. And I am interested in statistics, real interested in them. I helped to develop two workforce management programs or agent scheduling programs. One of them is Excel Scheduler, and now I'm working with the same person on another program that will be a simplified version of that. And that's it's ready for beta testing right now. So that's my involvement in the industry.
Great. Well, thank you, Allan. And Dennis?
Dennis O'Hara, president of American Communication Center. We've been in business since 1990, something like that. I'm not sure, about 20 years, 22 years, 23 years, somewhere in there. I was also an ATSI president. Allan and I were serving on the board of directors at the same time with ATSI. I was president of the Startel National User Group way back when. In time, I was briefly president of ASTA because nobody else would do it at the time, so I stepped in for 4 months and did that. Allan and I worked together and trying to help put things together for this industry certification program. So we're still in business, we're still doing similar stuff, and everything's working well these days.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Dennis. Just briefly, the reason we're here today, several months ago I had an ATSI board meeting. I'm also on the ATSI board of directors. A question.
God bless you.
I'm sorry?
God bless you.
Thank you. Okay. Question came up about standards and from one of the members, and I believe they were inquiring as to suggested average time to answers or suggested abandon rates, that sort of thing. And somehow this standards document surfaced, and there was some confusion, I think, as to the background of the document and the intent and that kind of thing. And my take on it, when I saw your names on it, I was able to bump into both of you at conventions recently and get some clarification as to what was going on with this document. And so what I'd like to have you guys explain is the how and why. This is pre when I've been involved with the board with ATSI. So I guess starting out, when was this?
Well, we think somewhere around 2006 or 2007.
And what's the how and the why?
You could tell them the how and the why, Allan.
Well, the Dennis said that remembered, which I didn't, that we had a meeting in Vancouver, and it was called SWOOP, and I forgot what that stands for now. I forgot all about it, in fact, until now. But
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
That's right, yeah. And so one of the weaknesses of the industry is that so the industry has had most of the time, but it has maybe 4 or 5 vendors of equipment, and you couldn't compare one answering service to another, or we didn't know if you could. I don't think you could either at the time, based on their statistics. So like percent abandons or average time to answer, that kind of thing. And I think there's other stats too, but those are the main ones: ATTA, average, percent of calls abandoned, yeah, and various things like that. But those are the 2 main stats. So, and so it struck me that I talked to Dennis about it, but I thought, well, if I could, let's say I advertised that my average time to answer was, let's say, 20 seconds. So so X percent of calls answer in Y seconds.
Right.
Like the worldwide standard seems to be 80% of calls answer in 20 seconds. And that's at the end of the fourth ring. So each ring is 6 seconds with 2 seconds of ringing. And so at the end of the fourth ring, 80% of calls would be answered. So, and also that I had less than 10% abandons, let's say. So if I could advertise that that's my standard, but if everybody else who was an ATSI member wasn't using the same standard, I mean, you could make up your own rules. Like you could say, well, we're going to disregard all calls that hung up before X seconds. And that X could be anywhere from 1 second or from 1,000th of a second to 20 seconds. And so the thought was that we could go around to each of the vendors and actually, with stopwatches, and actually time, like maybe feed 50 or more calls through their system and actually time it with the stopwatch so that we made sure that the average time to answer was based on the same criteria, and that also the percent abandons were could be compared. You can compare them from one platform to another. So the problem was that when we first started is that Telescan, and I think StarTel too, disregard all calls that hit their switch that were only hitting their switch for less than 2 seconds, something like that, 2 or 3 seconds, or maybe even 1 ring. So if the caller hung up before, let's say 1 ring, that'd be 6 seconds, they wouldn't count that. So you wouldn't know that was abandoned because they're not counting it. But Amtelco counts every call that lasts more than 1,000th of a second. And actually, every call hits their switch, and they measure that in the 1,000th of a second. So, and the other thing was that what does it mean, average time to answer? Because there's things like front-end screening greetings, as Dennis coined the term, he's right, is an excellent one. There's mandatory screening message that we can make our callers listen to, like, hello and thank you for calling Westside Clinic. If you have a medical emergency, hang up and call 911 or go to the hospital and that kind of thing. So do you count that in the average time to answer or not? And what about the auto answer? So like after 3 rings, you might have a message that comes on, thank you for holding, we'll be right with you, or we'll be with you shortly. Is that counted is ringing time? What do you count? So we arranged to go see, I think, at least 4 vendors, and they were StarChell, Amtelco, OnVSource, and Telescan. Oh, we visited Tascam too. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's the one in Oklahoma?
No, that was Oklahoma was OnVSource, and Tascam was out in Chico, California.
That's right.
Gags.
Yeah.
So they that's kind of the background and the reason for why we embarked on this.
Now, I believe what you were also trying to do is confirm that if the reports generated by a switch said this call was on hold for 10 seconds, that it in fact was on hold for 10 seconds.
That's exactly right, Randy. That's part of it.
And you were using stopwatches, I understand?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We had stopwatches.
Wow.
Yeah. They were good ones, though.
Yeah. Yeah, we counted, like, I can remember sitting out in Crystal's office, Dennis's wife's office.
Yeah.
And
not at that point, but later on, we would do it, right?
yeah, we sat there with our stopwatches, and we feel like 20 calls that were we have an auto answer, and then we have a pre-screening message. And for each of these scenarios, we treat like 20 calls and we time them. And then Dennis, I could see him very vividly in my memory, writing them down, all these stats down.
Now, reading from the certification document, there's a mission section, and it says to define and establish a core set of metrics that are universally accepted and adhered to by the vendors that support our members. It goes on to say, a couple paragraphs later, to say the purpose and intent is to measure the caller's experience, basically quality control.
Exactly.
It then goes into the process of the certification, which is quite lengthy. It has requirements for the vendor, requirements for the site. The site has to set up test accounts, and there are about 5 different scenarios outlined. And so it's quite a process to certify one of these sites. Did anyone pass? How did that go? What happened?
Well, let me just say that that's a very well-written document.
It is.
But I think Dennis...
Who did that, I wonder?
Dennis and I did it together, and Dennis is a very good writer. But we did it together, and then we gave it to Jerry Sirkovnik to critique, as I remember.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
And I still miss Jerry a lot. We lost somebody. When we lost, this industry lost Jerry, that was a loss.
Yeah.
Anyway, she did critique it and had some good suggestions too.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing was you had to get the vendor to agree to go through the whole thing process. And then you had to find somebody, one of the vendor's customers, who would agree to have, their days growing for about, 4 days? Was it 3 days minimum? I would think we were out there.
We were there at least several days,
Yeah. It was intrusive.
Now, how were the results? I mean, were the reports by the vendor reasonably consistent with what your findings were?
Yeah, that's my German Shepherd in the background here. Sorry. Yeah, I think once we measured them out and tested them out, again, the best of our ability with stopwatches. I mean, it was as accurate as we could possibly measure them, and it was interesting once we got into it. And once we tested the one, I think we did Telscan first, and then StarTel, and then Amtelco, I guess.
Where was the StarTel? I've forgotten where that was.
That was at the fellow in California, above there. I don't remember his name now, but that's horrible. I'm old. Forgive me, everybody, if I don't remember your name. I apologize.
It's okay.
I'm getting really, really old now, so.
Well, I can't remember either, Dennis.
So. Yeah. Whoever the guy was, he was a nice guy. We came into his office, we took it over, we had the folks from StarTel drove up, and it was Seamus. Remember Seamus?
Oh, Seamus, yeah.
Yeah, he helped us out there, and
great guy, yeah.
Yep.
Now, whatever happened to this committee? Because I know it doesn't exist now.
Well, when I was president, I was in charge of it. Then when Dennis was president, he became in charge, and he actually made a lot of headway, especially with StarTel, right, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, between the 3 companies that we tested, all 3 passed. And I think the key thing to keep in mind is we're not saying that every single report that a vendor generates is going to be exactly the same. We're saying on this specific scenario, testing these specific items, they all have to be this amount. Because initially when we went back to the swoop meeting, the main reason for it is back then there was a lot of people sharing calls. So let's say I had an account that was going to require, 500 operators to handle it. Well, I don't have 500 operators, so I called my friend Allan up, hey, you interested in sharing this with me? So I'm on a StarTel, Allan's on an Amtelco, so let's call Randy. Randy, I guess at the time you were on, whatever you were on, I don't remember, I guess you're StarTel now, but I'm Telscan now, so I'm a vagabond in this whole thing. But all 3 of those systems would measure the calls exactly the same. So we could give a report to the customer that says average time to answer, and so on and so forth are exactly the same.
Yeah, that was a big thing. I forgot about that. That was a big issue.
Yeah, and everybody's got calls that they share now and things like that. And that 80-20 rule they were talking about, that's sort of a call center statistic.
Yeah, around the world, kind of.
Yeah, but again, it's, 80% of what? How you measure it?
Yeah.
So Dennis,
So that was
after
hard.
you had faded away, or what happened with the committee? Or
Well,
do you know?
we completed it. We handed it back
Oh.
to the group, to the board, and said, "This is what the findings are." We had discussions with the different vendors of, "Hey, get this out there. It's a good way to promote your product because you passed the test. You're certified by APSI that your switch really does what it says it does."
Right.
And then it died a slow death after that. So.
Now, if someone wanted to do this themselves, this is something you could do yourself. You could set up your own test accounts, get your own stopwatches, and start,
Yeah,
checking
good
the numbers.
stuff.
Yeah, the idea was that you could say certified by ATSI,
Right.
HPSI.
Wow.
Right.
And so then if we both had our stats, they could, and we said certified by ATSI and they were comparable, then the people would know that we were comparable.
Oh, okay.
Right. And I will say this as far as what happened to it. I mean, I can remember Allan and I go around talking about this at different places, and once you get into the parameters, that's with the ATA and the switching and the stopwatches and all this, you could literally see people in the audience like, they were dropping off to sleep. Allan and I did it, and we were dropping off to sleep trying to explain it to everybody.
It's happening right now.
Yeah.
But like on resource does not measure the time, all the wrap time. So when a call
I forgot about that.
goes back to the agent from what Star Telco calls an action, or Telco calls them Q.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what echo is not a term that's used. So when it pops back on agent screen, they don't measure that at least the wrap time part of it. I don't know about the talk time because when they first started measuring wrap time, they were really trying to measure the time of the original call. And I guess there was no pressure from their users to measure all the highlighted time. And also, Tommy, it's a little bit different system. You can have 9 calls on hold at each agent station, and I think it was difficult because of the basic architecture. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to smoke out. But ultimately, if we could compare ourselves, like certified by ATSI, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a sort of a way, at that time, the ATSI Award of Excellence and all that was beginning to really come up, and it was in the beginning of the heyday. And so that was a way for the vendors to say, hey, look, we're site certified. They chose not to.
They're certified by ATSI, right?
Yeah, they probably should have, and that was probably a mistake. But and the other thing, I think is the wrap time, and whatever it was, 10, 12 years ago, I don't think that many people were billing for wrap time.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Dennis and I were talking about this earlier that wrap time was kind of missing from this. And when I first got into business, just 20 some odd years ago, time billing was very, very new. Very few people were doing it. It was mostly transactional or call billing, and the time was kind of not really accepted yet. So that's probably why it was omitted, because it wasn't that widely used. Now everyone's dissecting time, so. No, the metrics.
Telco didn't measure wrap time until 1993. So that would be actually 29 years ago.
Yeah, well, I got into business in '95, and that was new. So okay, going through the metrics, let's just kind of breeze through these. Average time to answer. This is something I watch continuously all day long. That's my indicator of quality service. My goal just personally is about 20 seconds. And I found an email from Ken Goldenberg, which is so true. And there's a discussion about KPI targets for abandoned calls, and it said our true threshold is client complaints.
Client complaints.
Yeah.
Somebody starts complaining, that means that means
If they're complaining, you got a problem. So, I found that with from my operation at least, If I keep my utilization around 60% and my average time to answer around 20 seconds, my complaint level is 0. Now, as that average time to answer starts getting longer and longer, that's when the potential for complaints, start happening.
And a lot of it also depends on your client base. What types of clients? If you have a lot of corporate clients, I'm not going to say they're okay with the longer hold time, ring time, but they have a different viewpoint of it.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of medical clients and Dr. So-and-so is calling in, he's probably not going to be the most patient individual on the planet. He wants it now, and I'm not going to wait type of thing. But corporate type stuff,
right?
There's a different way of looking at it, probably because their own call centers are hideous. But
there's a really great answering service. It's actually in Columbus, Ohio, but they the people there, I know them pretty well, real well, and they said that they're worried about calls that rang more than 2 minutes, so it'll be 120 seconds because most of their complaints don't come. Most people, the customers, and they have a lot of industrial customers, but a lot of hospices and people like that too. But they said that the biggest complaints are from people where the call rang over 2 minutes.
Wow.
So it's really hard
I can see that.
Yeah. I'm glad to see it too, really.
Moving along, a percent of calls abandoned. I know when I first started looking at that, mine runs between 10 and 20% sometimes. Obviously, the longer the average time to answer, the higher the abandon rate.
Yeah, mine do too, to be honest, Randy. It used to be 12%, but since coronavirus, and it's definitely up to that.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see it that big of a number, but I've been confirming numbers, and it's pretty real. So
the other interesting part about the calls abandoned, you can call that money lost.
Yeah,
definitely.
You don't answer the call, then you're not making any money.
Oh, definitely, yeah, very definitely, and that is true in actuality. It's not just a theory.
Exactly.
It's true.
Now, percentage of calls hanging up during a voicemail pre-screen message.
Well, the idea there was that it's of interest to you and whether the pre-screening message is you have the right wording in your pre-screening message, because if they wait till the end, maybe that's not good. Maybe you should have hung up right away. Like maybe you should say our regular office hours are 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, rather than saying, if this is a medical emergency, please hang up and call 911 or go to the emergency room. And then a little ways later, you give the hours. So
I'm guessing it's on the purpose of the pre-screen. I know a lot of people use the pre-screen to kind of push away calls. It's a holiday, they're closed, we can't help you, that kind of stuff. Whereas you have different pre-screens that might be, press 1 for sales and press 2 for service and whatever. And so there you want the person to listen to all the different options, perhaps.
That is true. Yeah.
So.
And it depends with a lot of folks the way they run their pre-screens. If you press 1 for sales, press 2 for whatever, customer service or something, and you drop them out right to that particular sub-account. And that will save pre-screening questions the agents have to off, that saves the agent work time, so on and so forth. So that's definitely helpful from that standpoint.
Yeah.
But one of the other things we looked at is how many people, when they're doing this, when the call comes in, is the pre-screening effective? In other words, are they hanging up within 5-6 seconds of the pre-screen? They're not there and they hang up on it.
Well, that's the next one, is the average time to hang up during a mandatory pre-screen message. So just prior we did the percent of calls hanging up, and then you have average time to hanging up. I'm just not sure how indicative that might be. I guess it depends on your type of business, but
well, I think Dennis put it right. I think he has. It's something of intellectual interest, maybe, until you really have time to look into that. But
you can also sell that information to your client, saying, "Look,
definitely,
your pre-screen is not
Yeah.
awful, but not doing what it's supposed to do. So
Yeah.
change it up, move it around, do something else.
Right.
Now we're talking about
Magic
hold
money.
time and the different kinds of hold time. So the first one here is average hold time of incoming calls prior to reaching an agent.
Yeah, well, that'd be time on hold for sure.
So this is slightly different from average time to answer. This is part of it, average time to answer, but it's more specific on the hold portion of it.
Yeah.
Like I like my calls, again, with that 20 seconds, that should be about 3 rings. Ideally, the call gets answered during that time frame so that they don't hit that recording that says, hey, you've reached ABC Company, the agents are busy, please stand by. Because boy, when the caller hears that message, then they know they've got the answering service, and the abandons, I can see mine jump right there. And
Well, there's some answering services. We had one that office that we acquired that where they use hold a lot. I think it might have been. They use hold a lot, so they put their caller. Like you could
park and hold.
well, park and hold, yeah. And so they wanted to answer right away. Like I remember one answering service where the theory was that they had people answer every call in the first ring, and then they parked it, hold and park.
Yeah.
And it might not be answered the second agent may not come on for minutes, but every call was answered on the first ring. So at the time, the big deal was to advertise that every call answered on the first ring. Remember that?
Yep.
And then, so that's the way you could do it. However, the agent might not get back to that caller for several minutes, but that was kind of the idea there, I think.
Now the next
But
one is
with
that.
answering service, we answer all calls within 1 ring.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Boy, that's putting you right up there at the top of the yellow page.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Then you had average hold time of calls, an incoming call after reaching an agent, which is what you'd be talking about with the park and hold, basically.
Right.
So they've reached an agent, then the agent put them on hold.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. And that's an important stat to measure, because if the call's coming in, and depending on how you're running your service, obviously, call comes in, comes off of hold, gets to an agent, and the agent's got to put it on hold immediately. That's a measurement of what's going on in your call center. You're understaffed or whatever, or that particular agent's a problem. So that when you got to the hold calls here, that became very laborious trying to figure, all right, hold that, hit the button now. All right, I'll play it. You're measuring that like a monkey with a football.
We did it though. We really did a thorough job.
Yeah.
The next one is average call duration. And one thing I noticed here was it's missing wrap time. And this kind of goes back to our conversation a few minutes ago about perhaps when this was worked on, time may not have even included wrap time, or was it a consideration then? I'm not sure, but it sure is now. So if this ever gets redone.
Well, that's all we wanted to measure, to make sure that included wrap time.
Yeah.
And some of them, like, to some degree, Pinnacle, and also, but also Telescan had just started measuring the screen time. So in other words, some of them, they didn't really end the call. Let's see, how did that work?
I should know that, but I don't.
The call can remain on the screen after the agent was done with it, and it would be replaced by a new call when a new call came in. And for sure, Pinnacle was like that, and I think Telescan might have been to some degree.
Well, the Telescan has their switch is called the Prism. So there's a Prism 1, which is what we tested at.
Oh yeah, you would use that, that's right.
And then the new one is the Prism 2, and that's got a lot more features and so forth. But if you're going to ask me how they measure that, you might as well shoot me now.
But we knew then, though. When we left Marcy Hewlett's office out in Crystal's office out there in Gilbert, Arizona, we knew.
Yeah. That's one thing. You got to look under the hood all these switches.
Yeah.
So you knew what was measuring what.
The next one here is average ring time, and this brings up a question I had for Dennis earlier. I notice quite often you're mentioning that calls under 12 seconds of ring time aren't included, and that was, Dennis, why don't you explain why that 12-second number came
If
up?
I remember correctly, it was the setup and tear down of the call. If the call comes in, it takes about 6 seconds for the phone company to set that call up and to present it to you. And then when you hung up, it took about 6 seconds to, quote, tear that call down.
Now, would that be still true today with SIP and all the technology we have?
Probably not.
Yeah.
No. No, with SIP, you're getting a much more accurate representation of the call, and it's coming in quickly. And there's, well, you can cut this part out if you want, but there was a woman I met at ATSI who does call measurements. She's from Canada. Can't remember her name or her company's name, and that's terrible. But she actually provides a service to the phone companies where they measure everything on the call before it gets answered. The whole time that call is in the system, if you will, everything's being like, whether it's getting bumped, everything and anything. And I suggested to them, Telco and Telscan, that they should incorporate that whole program into their system.
But we only have control over it really once it hits our switch.
Yeah, we
prior
can't do
to that,
anything with it, but they
yeah.
can. Her system hangs on, if you will,
Oh.
to that circuit while it's out there. And I was looking at real-time data of calls coming in. It was pretty amazing. So.
Oh, pretty neat. Then the percent of calls answered in X seconds, which is another thing I look at too. I like to see at least 60, 70%, like your 80% rule, I guess, Allan. I'm glad when it's around 60 or 70% of my calls are being answered within about 20 seconds. Is that what y'all are seeing too, or something similar to that? Or
Yeah, we used to have closer to 80, but since we had staffing issues, it's not nearly that good. So but we're working on it, but of course.
And also, I think, and this is going to sound like a cop-out, I guess I've been outside of the industry, when COVID hit, the big thing was, well, we're not going to get any phone calls, we're going to lose business. My business went through the ceiling. We had some companies that quit, sure, but other else is like, okay, you just answer all my calls now.
Yeah, we do that now a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So we're still seeing a lot of them. They're not going back and answering their phones. It's like, here you go.
They can't hire enough people to do it. So
Exactly.
that's our biggest challenge too, is labor, and everyone I talk to is in the same boat. Finding labor is tough out there. So
Definitely.
So.
But if you keep track, all these things that are being measured in here are still true today. There's nothing about them that's unimportant. Again, I think there are things with the new switches and the advancements and so forth, this could probably easily be refreshed, if you will.
Yeah.
And if people really wanted to find out what was going on with their switches, call your vendors and say, hey.
We proved that the data is there for everyone. Telscan, StarTel, and Telco.
Yep.
We didn't get a look at Pinnacle, but we just didn't get that far before time ran out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And again, I think it was at the swoop meeting, however you pronounce that, there was top 3 things that came out of that. And this was, if I'm just vague recollection, like number 2 of those 3 things. I'll be honest with you now, I don't even remember what the other 2 things were.
Me either.
So I think Larry Goldenberg was there. I'd probably call him and ask him. He remembers everything. Larry's got a great mind for that type of stuff. But it was an interesting undertaking. And personally, for me, I got to travel around to all the vendors with Allan, so I got to pick his brain night and day. And by the end of the day, he was ready to stab me probably. But I thought, how do we do this?
No way, that was really interesting. I'll never forget going to those places.
Okay.
We used to joke that I'm very hard of hearing. Allan, of course, is very soft spoken. So most of us, Allan saying something, me going, what?
Yeah.
So,
Well, guys, I'm out of questions. If there's any more comments you have, or suggestions, or interesting remarks.
my suggestion would be to have ATSI go back and take a look at it and see if it's something, I don't know, you need a full blown, well, I guess you're probably doing a committee if you're going to have ATSI do it, but, bring it up to the vendors and say, hey, put this back out there We've recently started using Randy's service, which I highly, highly recommend.
Randy's what?
And what's that?
Randy's.
Randy's billing.
Oh yeah, I recommend. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Perfect billing program. Really, so easy to use.
You know, she's not in the room in here, but I got to get my wife to finish it. But that's a different story. But I mean, it has everything you possibly need to get the stuff done. So I applaud Randy for taking up the sword on this thing and trying to figure out how to get this thing. And unless you know your numbers, you don't know what's going on in your business.
Yeah, the profitability report is gigantic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so important. And these numbers, I'm sure like you guys too, I've been maintaining spreadsheets. I still have paper spreadsheets from way back when of, my calls per day and manually calculating out utilization and all that kind of stuff. And now with, it's in my phone, that's great. I can look at it at the minute and know exactly what we're doing. So the technology is there, just take advantage of it. But knowing those numbers is so critical to running a profitable
Randy,
business. So.
For sure, Randy, don't let people there's one person we know in New York, you and I know, who came up with his own definition of what the profitability, of the measurement of profitability, but the only way to measure it is agent highlighted time. So don't let, so tell people, look, these are the stats for StarTel and the stats for Telescan and for mTelco and Pinnacle, and don't use any other stats in terms of measuring what highlighted time is. So highlighted time is talk time, wrap up time, and agent hold time, and that's it. Period.
Well, that's what I bill for too, and that's work time basically on StarTel, and
Right.
same thing.
Yeah.
And on Telescan, it's those first things, 13 fields in that detail record of all the different pieces of time. They all should be billable. And if your agent is in there working, doing an on-call schedule or changing someone's phone number, they're working for that client. That should be billable time.
On-call should be too. And don't let them, but some of them, like, I think it's one we were talking about in the city, but what they did is they didn't measure all the wrap-up time because they didn't think that they should measure like what we call fetch time, in telco, and they didn't want to measure that, but that's part of agent time. So
Absolutely.
they didn't think, well, maybe that shouldn't be billed to the client, but you got to be, if nothing else, you got to be comparable with other answering services on what's agent time, highlighted time, or screen time, work time, because that's how you determine what to bill. It's really important. It is the key figure in determining what to bill.
Okay.
Yeah, I know when.
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. When Crystal came on, she changed a lot of our billing scenarios, and I mean, she increased billing absolutely.
I know.
by measuring things the right way, by putting the things together, and I mean, she's been a lightning bolt for me. Like, I never thought of it that way, type of thing, because you get used to doing something one way, and until somebody hits you in the back of the head, saying, "No, do it this way; it's better." You sort of slip into that sort of scenario.
Well, I may have to get back to you guys and have us do a video on how to raise rates.
Well, I got a lot of suggestions on that, but
Okay.
not necessarily on how to raise them, but just to raise them.
To raise them.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, guys, and to the viewers, thank you for listening to watching our video here. We appreciate it, and everyone have a great week. And Dennis, Allan, thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and take care, everybody.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks for remembering a couple of old horses.